What's up, YouTube? It's your old school expert, and today we've got another blast from the past as we take a trip down memory lane and check out a first edition complete set of Pharaonic Guardian released all the way back in the summer of 2003. So we're gonna bust right into this set and talk about the set that was way too good, way too ahead of its time when it was released. So this set I credit with really taking Yu-Gi-Oh! Down a level in terms of participation and interest, because this is when the game got a little more confusing, a little more strategical, and it just wasn't the, summon big monster attack for game kind of a game that it used to be. So I think a lot of people became disinterested in Yu-Gi-Oh! Around this time, and then more of the true collectors and players stuck around after this set was released. So I will talk a little bit more of that when I get to the specific card. I've got a real short story about that one. So in the meantime, this set didn't release too many staples of its time because, as I said earlier, this set was way before its time. So many of these cards, when they were released, were pretty much useless and nobody really used them in competitive dueling. It was kind of a lame set at the time. And later on, some of these cards just became so critical and very much a big part of the metagame and the competitive scene. So Ring of Destruction is one of those staples that was really good right out the gate and was quickly put at one per deck for a very long time, and then eventually banned, and now they've eroded it, kind of nerfed it a little bit, but it's still a useful card. King Tiger Wangu, that is another card that when it came out, not too many people ran monsters that were 1400, I think, 1400 or less attack that would have been automatically destroyed. But as the game went on, monsters got weaker, even though their effects became stronger, and this became a very good card for stalling your opponent out. So Arsenal Bug is one of the short prints, so is Maiden of the Aqua. Mucus Yolk, that was one of those cards that could sneak up on you. I remember losing a duel to it, and I will never forget it because my opponent equipped it with Acts of Despair, attacked it directly, and every time I think it attacks directly like that, at the end of the turn or after it inflicts the damage, something like that, this card gains 1,000 attack points. So really quickly, this can become a big problem if you don't have like a Mirror Force, Dark Hole, Raigeki, something like that. And I didn't have anything for like 3 turns, and it was done. I couldn't do anything about it. This was another of those attack directly cards, but this one actually had an attack. You didn't have to equip it like you did with Mucus Yolk. Sasuke Samurai was very good against flip effects. Saw some play, but not a lot, nothing to call it a staple. The Egyptian theme, in my opinion, was very cool. I actually really enjoyed this set, although this is one of the sets that, it's one of my least favorite in the original series because of, not because of the set itself, but because so many people had quit when the set came out. So Pyramid Turtle was very good as a necessity for zombies. Guardian Sphinx was pretty cool, but not a lot useful. Great Desert and Fuchsia Ricci were never really used. I did play against a deck, not in tournament, but just for fun, and it was terrible. Dice Jar has been one of those cards that is ahead of its time. Donzalug was one of the few cards in here that was used pretty often, including the time this set was released. It was a very good card. So I guess that's one of the maybe 3 or 4 cards in here that were used pretty regularly from the onset of the release of this set. Book of Life, of course, a staple for zombie decks back then. Book of Taiyu was decent for deck out decks if you're running like a bunch of jars and you were trying to use them the turn you set them. That was good for that. And then Book of Moon, of course, again, this wasn't really used when it first came out, but this became a staple later on and through like what, 2008, 2009, all the way through like 2010, 2011. This was a good card. And even today, it's not a bad card. And then in GOAT format, this was a staple, absolute staple in GOAT format. Mirage of Nightmare, one of the other cards that was an absolute staple. So that's probably the third one I'd say that pretty much everybody used because it was so dang nasty. And if you don't know how it's used, watch my 2004 Chaos deck, and I have a great example of how this card is used and how it can give you an insane advantage. And that's why it's still banned today. They won't be able to bring that back unless they severely errata the effect. Timidity, I always thought that was a cool card. just some random stuff. It's all pretty much either zombie or ancient Egyptian inspired, which I think is very cool. Makes this set, like, I love the artwork. Very cool set. Trap Dust Shoot, pretty good card. Again, not really used when it first came out, but later on or in GOAT format, it's a very good card in GOAT format. Hellpalmer is the cover card. Again, not a very good card when it was released. Dark Geroid saw some play. I remember a lot of Fiend decks were running it, and then with Mystic Tomato, it actually worked out pretty well. It's a pretty decent card with Mystic Tomato, so it was nice. Gravekeepers, again, these guys, especially Spy and Guard, saw a lot of play in like GOAT format and formats much later than 2003, but back in 2003, not that great of a card. Some more Gravekeeper stuff. A Cat of Ill Omen was always kind of cool, kind of useful in a lot of rogue decks that needed a trap. Reaper on the Nightmare is another card you want in your fusion deck for GOAT format. You never know when you're going to use something like that. It's a level 5, has the effect of Spirit Reaper and can attack directly, so pretty decent card. So Spirit Reaper is the card that I wanted to tell you a very quick story about. So a little bit, actually just after the set was released, I noticed that there was a huge, sorry, this is bothering me. I think that's maybe on the artwork. Yeah, I think that's a star. I thought it was dust and it was really bothering me. My OCD's coming out. So back in 2003 when this set was released, I was talking to one of the guys that was a regular at my locals. He was very good. He was a lot better than I was. And he was quitting. And I was asking him why. I mean, you have been going for over a year strong. Why were you quitting competitive play? And he said, you know, up until Legacy of Darkness, the game was fun. It was really good. It was not too complicated. But he said, and he pulled out a Spirit Reaper, and he said, look at this. He said, this is why people are quitting. And it's because the text is really long. Like, you know, it's got multiple effects. If it's targeted by something, it gets destroyed after the target resolves. If it can't be destroyed by battle. If it attacks and inflicts battle damage, then you can discard a card randomly from your opponent's hand. It's got a lot of effects, and to him, that was just too much. And it's funny, if he saw today's game, he wouldn't even recognize it because the cards have so many effects, and their text can be so long. But that's what I remember him saying, and I was thinking, wow, that's interesting. And I never saw him after that. He never came back to the game. He truly quit. So I will always remember this set because of that, and Spirit Reaper will forever remind me of how many people quit during this set and never really came back because the game had just become something they weren't interested in. So here we got Reasoning. That was a really good card. Still a decent card today. Darkroom of Nightmare saw some play a few years back in burn decks. It's a decent chip damage, but I don't know. I don't see it being all that great. I think you can build a really good burn deck without it by just using your standard chain burn stuff plus all the draw stuff there is out there today, like Pot of Extravagance and Balance of Judgment. You can really plus a lot with a burn deck, especially using Ojama Trio. Metamorphosis, again, another card that wasn't really used that much when it was released. Some decks ran it, but not very popular. But during GOAT format, this is an absolute staple. Everybody runs it because you can target one of your GOAT tokens and then Metamorphosis it into a Thousand Eyes Restrict, which is kind of the ultimate boss monster other than maybe BLS, because nothing can attack or change battle position when Thousand Eyes Restrict is face up on the field. So it's a real game changer. And that card allows you to turn a really weak monster into a Thousand Eyes Restrict. And the final page, finishing it off, kind of a lot of ultras here. So, and then the Trap of Board Eraser. Visor Shock was never really a card anybody cared to run. It just didn't have a great effect. I think when it's summoned to the field, it bounces all spell and trap cards or magic and trap cards up to the owner's hands. Question was kind of a weird card. Like, you ask your opponent, I think, what's the monster at the bottom of your graveyard, and if they get it right, it gets removed, and if they get it wrong, you special summon it. It's kind of weird. Rope of Life, again, didn't really see a lot a lot of love. Nightmare Wheel, if this had been released in like Magic Ruler, like a Spellbinding Circle, this would have been a lot better, or even earlier. But by the time this came out, there was already, it just wasn't that great. There was already a lot of magic and trap removal. And then Lava Golem really only saw play in burn decks, but it was very good for those, but it wasn't a staple for, especially for beatdown, because you special summon Lava Golem to your opponent's side of the field, and then you're not allowed to summon anything the turn that you use him. So you can't even summon your own monster. So that is Pharaonic Guardian, first edition complete set, a set that was way ahead of its time. It had so many good cards that became good later on, but you know, upon release were just not used, they weren't very competitive for what was already out there. They didn't add a whole lot to the game. And then they started, you know, introducing very long effects, and I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people quit the game. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope this video was nostalgic for you. We will do Magician's Force next, and as always, stay tuned for more awesome Yu-Gi-Oh videos.